Hey everyone, Aaron here. One thing we like to do at Restoration Church is tell stories about what God has done in each of our lives. And really what he's done maybe to bring us to the point where we are today. And so the reason we do that is because everyone's story is a little bit differently. And some of you maybe just were introduced to Jesus recently. However, some of you've known this for your entire life. Like faith, Christianity has been a part of your life for a long time. Toddler and Sunday school, like that's how far Christianity has been a part of your life. And so that being said, I'm joined here today by Tyler Brush.
Mr. Ottaway, how are you?
I am very well, Mr. Brush.
Good.
Tyler's going to tell a little bit of his story, and so Tyler, kind of what has been your background in faith and religion and your knowledge of Jesus? What did that look like for you growing up?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was born into a godly family. Both my parents are very involved in the church, and especially in the Cambridge area here. Oldest of four, and all four of us knew nothing. Like we said before with the, running around in our diapers, knowing about Jesus. That was like from the moment I can remember, I've been going to church, and even so much that my parents believed in Christian education too. So I was going to a Christian school. I went from JK all the way to grade 12. So I was a lifer.
You're like, the word Christian was like the pronoun before everything that you
was
did.
like, yeah.
Christian school, Christian church, Christian family.
I went by Christian instead of Tyler.
Exactly. So that's just been a pronoun in your life.
Yeah, it's always been a part, and always kind of been driven home. Even you go into like my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and like basically everything was Christian based and really promoted that kind of lifestyle. So
now, was that something that for you, do you think was, now I know your story. I've known Tyler a long time.
Too long, maybe.
Maybe too long. No, not too long at all. Maybe for you. Do you think that was a positive thing to have Christians surround your life being surrounded by a Christian all the time, and then knowing kind of some of your story? Why was it not compelling to you for a large part of your life?
I think it was definitely positive. I know there's a lot worse scenarios to be born into.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So I can't necessarily be upset with the way I was brought up and all that kind of stuff. But I think just with being, you're going to a private Christian school 5 days a week, and then you're going to church on Sundays. So that's 6 days a week that you really being immersed in this stuff. And maybe sometimes it just gets to be a little too much, or especially I was big into sports. So I played hockey and baseball growing up. And so you go to these events and none of those people are Christians.
Yeah.
And I know, like with males, it's kind of like a male bravado thing, especially in sports where you want to be the one controlling everything out there.
Yeah.
And I just kind of viewed, Christians as, there's a weakness to them that they can't go out there and do it. They have to rely on God to kind of move forward and that kind of stuff. So I think that was my initial thought, especially as like a kid.
Yeah. And I think it really wasn't until recently that I thought, okay, Tyler really wants to take this seriously. Mm-hmm. Can you tell a little bit, like, what kind of led to the point where, I don't know how you describe it, like a drifting, or like, this is just not compelling to me? You know what I mean? Like, where were you in that stage of life? What kind of led there?
I think, when you're a kid, most of the stuff I think just kind of flies over your head, and you just know. Like I said, I grew up in it, so it's just a custom. You go to church, you memorize the Bible verses, you sing the songs. I don't know if I ever really fully took it on myself though, and like put it on myself to dive a little deeper and a little bit more.
Right.
And then I think kind of the environment I was in, sometimes they focused a little too much on the extremities, and just as long as you were looking like a Christian, it didn't matter what was going on inside.
Okay.
And that was kind of the vibe I was getting. And so I know, like, within certain circles and stuff, there was a lot of onus put on trivial things, like what you were wearing and what kind of haircut you had and all that kind of stuff. And I think I just remember throughout my high school just kind of getting, I'm a pretty, I would say I'm strong-willed. I'm sure my family would say stubborn. But
depends on who you talk to.
Depends who you're talking to. Yeah. Some could just say plain stupid. But, so like being told these little trivial things that I didn't think had much meaning, that maybe were important to other people, and being told, you have to look this way, you have to dress this way, you have to show up here, do what you're told kind of thing. It just kind of slowly hardened my heart a little bit.
Okay.
To the point where I just kind of had enough. And I think,
So thank you for sharing, by the way. Thank you for being honest. it was a few months ago that I was just flipping through Instagram, which you shouldn't do, by the way.
No.
But I remember seeing a story pop up, and it was a verse that you had posted on your story. And I remember being like, Tyler Brush posted a verse? And I'd always known you'd been around, Christian family, and, I'd seen you at church every now and then, but I'm like, I didn't know he was really that interested. And so I remember sending you a message being like, hey, can we talk? We had lunch and stuff. And can you what led us to, because I feel like in your life and just talking to you, there's been a shift in like how you understand the gospel, that you want to take this seriously now. You want to take Jesus seriously and following Jesus seriously. So what has led to that?
I think just a lot of questions, I guess. I had a point kind of throughout high school, I'd kind of written off Christianity and wanting to do any of that kind of stuff. I was, a hard heart, pretty stubborn.
Yeah.
And then I went from this environment of, being controlled so fiercely, and every little thing I did was kind of like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? To I went on to Wilfrid Laurier University, which is very much a secular university.
Yeah.
And they didn't give a crap what I did, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever I would. So the reins were kind of loose.
Yeah.
And I went out and I just kind of started exploring other avenues.
Yeah.
Maybe a little too much with, the alcohol and
Yeah.
chasing girls and that kind of stuff. And I just came to a realization and a point that like it wasn't really that fun, nor was it really fulfilling anything I needed.
Yeah.
So then I started asking more questions, and I think I kind of just fell back on that faith, just because it was my foundation. And
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily have anyone to go to, and I didn't really want to go to anyone. I just wanted to figure things out on my own.
Yeah.
So I started just doing
Some
a little bit of
people
research.
call that strong-willed.
Some
call
people,
it stubborn, right?
Not stubborn. They would not call it stubborn. And I got my degree in science, which is very much like you come up with a hypothesis, and then you do your research and you do your experiments, and then you come up with a result.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of way I went about it. And I just started YouTubing a lot of questions I had, and maybe looking into some devotions and that kind of stuff. And I think just over time, slowly kind of got me to a point where I was a little more and more, like I always knew as a kid what to believe.
Yeah.
I didn't know why. And I think that really hit me as I started to ask myself why, and I started to go in and search on my own. So
I think that's really important for us. It's one thing to know what to believe, but it's a completely different thing to know why to actually believe those things. And I just want to say, like, when I even saw that verse and had lunch with you, I was like, man, this has nothing to do with Restoration Church. This has nothing to do with me. Like, this is completely unrelated.
Yeah.
This has been like God working in you. And you were like, who has led you here? What church is like? No one really. It's just been God working on my heart. And so I'm like,
it's
man, praise God for that. Cause I'm like,
yeah.
I haven't been a part of this other than just hearing your story kind of third hand.
Mm-hmm.
And, so thank you for sharing, Tyler. And I guess, what would you say to someone who is wrestling with the same things that you wrestled with? It's like, I know the story, I know the what, but it's just not compelling to me. Like, I just don't want to follow this, what I've been taught my whole life. What would you say to them?
I think based off of my experiences, I think I've learned now that you don't necessarily have to be perfect to be a Christian. You just have to be willing to work on yourself and follow in the Lord and that kind of stuff. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, was I would look at, well, I don't want to dress that way, and I don't want to say these things, and I don't want to go to these events, so that, why would I do it? I'm not going to be a Christian then. It's just easier to not. But you don't necessarily have to be, perfect on the exterior, as long as you're working on yourself inside and keeping up with your prayers and reading the Bible and studying and asking questions. Like, you should be asking questions. That's how you're going to learn, right? And if you're not asking questions, I would question why you're not asking questions.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, all of us are in process of understanding. And ultimately, of course, Christianity, we believe that we're not perfect. I mean, that's kind of a freeing thing to say, and it's a freeing thing for you to discover. Yeah. We're not perfect. Yeah. I don't have it all together. In fact, because I'm a Christian, I can say, hey, guess what? I do not have this thing all together. And I don't have all the answers either.
Yeah. That was a big one.
But because of what Jesus has done, and that is where my foundation is, right? That's what my faith is upon. It's not about me. It's about what God has done for me. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really freeing thing to come to understand.
And I think just to butt in here, for that conversation we had, that lunch we had, and your lovely wife was there as well, and you kind of asked the question, what, like I would say, I'm kind of on the fence right now, and you're saying, well, what's the reason you're not fully committed? And I say, well, I don't have all the answers yet.
Right.
and I'd still want to do some more research and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And that's when you guys kind of open my eyes to the fact, well, you don't have to have all the answers. You
Right.
know, you could be 85-year-old Christian for your whole life and still not have all the answers.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So
And so, thank you so much, Tyler, for sharing your story. If you are struggling with the same thing, you have, if maybe you grew up in church for a long time and you have a lot of questions, and maybe God's been working on your heart, and you're like, I don't know where to go from here. I invite you, message us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk through those things with you. And thanks, Tyler.
thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.